All of those transformations were done with Dehancer Pro, and Dehancer is a film emulation program that lives inside of your video editing or even your photo editing software. I've been using Dehancer with Adobe Premiere for the past couple months, and I found that it's a really easy way of dialing in that film-like cinematic look with my footage. If you're new to the channel, my name is Henry. I'm a photographer and videographer, and I help creatives work smarter and earn more. So in today's video, what I'm going to show you is how I use Dehancer in my workflow. We'll be going through some test footage. I'll show you the key features, some of my favorite settings, but be sure to stick around to the end because I'll be sharing with you what I think is a game-changing feature that offers permanent value out of this plugin. All right, let's dive in. Okay, we have our test footage loaded up inside of Adobe Premiere. And because Dehancer is an effect and not a LUT, we shouldn't be here on Illumetri Color. We want to find it under Effects, Film Emulation, and then you'll see Dehancer Pro. So let's bring that into this blank adjustment layer. I like to work with adjustment layers rather than the clips themselves, just for flexibility, but you can do either one. And when we brought that in, you'll notice there was a pretty big color shift there. So let's go into Effect Controls and see what happened. So here under Effect Controls, you see all these different parameters for Dehancer Pro, and it's quite a lot to go through, but we'll just go from the top. And if we open up the first two panels, what's mostly responsible for that color shift is the film stock here being applied by default. I don't really like that it's applied by default, but it's pretty easy to turn off. We're just going to turn this off, disable it. Now we have a slightly more accurate idea of what the footage looks like. But also there's Rec 709 applied here as the input source. And that's not accurate either because we didn't do any color space transform. So instead we're going to go to Choose Camera. And in my case, it's the Sony a6700 with S-Log3, S-Gamut 3, .cine. And that looks much closer. And that camera matching setting is pretty useful, especially if you're working with a team of videographers that have different systems, or maybe you shoot on different cameras. So color matching is made pretty simple that way. Real quick, before we go into some of these other panels, I just want to show you this defringe capability. Most of this footage was shot on the Zeiss 55 1.8, which is a beautiful lens, but it can have some color fringing issues. And if you go into an area like this with really strong highlights, you can see that there is a bit of fringing happening here. So let's turn this on. And we'll just push this up to 100. We'll also expand the radius. And yeah, you can see that that little bit of fringing has really been desaturated and gone away. Now, I don't actually know if removing it helps the footage look cinematic, but it's nice to know that this is a feature that will clean up your video from color fringing if you want it to. All right, so now for the fun part. So let's get into the film emulations. We're going to re-enable that Kodak Vision 3 250D. I think that looks nice. It's a little bit less saturated than I want. So let's open this drop-down menu. You'll see there's a ton of film stocks that we can choose from. Here's Cinestill 50D, Fujichrome, Ektachrome. There's even Lomachrome. And then there's some really nice black and white film emulations as well. But since there's so many to choose from, I really wish that this just popped out into kind of a visual representation of each one of these film stocks. But since there isn't that option in here, I found a quick workaround. Dehancer actually has an online program. So let's jump over here. This is Dehancer Online. And it's not meant for video, but you can transform your photos in a very similar way. So what I'm going to do is let's temporarily disable the film stock. And then we're going to export this frame. I'm going to take that frame into Dehancer now. Look at all these options. Now, to me, this is actually a much easier way of picking the film stock that you want. Because if you're back here and you're just going through this drop-down menu, unless you know in advance what your favorites are, I actually think Dehancer Online is an easier way to choose. So let's go back to Dehancer Online. And you can kind of just take a quick glance at what you think looks good. And there's a ton of great options here. I like the Fujichrome Velvia 50 on 2383, and we'll talk about what that 2383 means. Great. So we can export that, or we can just use this as a reference setting. So let's go over here and match it in Dehancer Pro. So Fujichrome Velvia 50. And that 2383, we're just going to jump ahead to the print profile here. That means it was printed on Kodak 2383 print film. So there we are with that setting. And I think that that's a really good starting point. Let's go to the next panel, Film Developer. So with this enabled, we can really emulate some boosted contrast, gamma correction, color separation, as well as a bit of color boost. I'm just going to do a little bit of these. So we went from here to here with a little bit more definition, more punch. I'm actually going to turn off the color boost. Okay, now I'd like to take a look at film compression, which is one of my favorite features about this plugin. So film compression is going to let me get back some of this highlight roll-off. Now, this footage is very high dynamic range, and I probably exposed to the right. So I do have good amounts of information in the shadows, but I might have lost something in the highlights. When I enable this, it brings back a lot of that detail. And I found that I've gotten much better results using this film compression setting within Dehancer rather than using a LUT. So let's bring up that impact and see what it can do. I think 100 actually looks really good. The white point determines at which point this highlight roll-off recovery kicks in. I'm going to bring it up to about 110. And then the tonal range, I found this oversaturates things really fast, so I'm going to leave that as well as color density alone. And here's where we started, and here's with a lot of that roll-off recovered. I'm actually going to bring impact down a little bit. I think it looks a little bit more real this way. Okay, so let's add some film grain to the image. We're going to open this up and enable film grain. I really like the 35mm ISO 500 or the 250. But if you want larger grain, go with like an 8mm or 16mm. 8mm ISO 500, I think this is a bit too much. It's a really pronounced effect. So I would use this more sparingly for this image. 35mm ISO 250 seems like a sweet spot, just a nice subtle amount of film grain. And then let's go on to Halation and Bloom. Now, Halation and Bloom seem like they're a little bit interchangeable, but Halation is really about the red-orange glow that you might get in the highlights, while Bloom is an overall diffusion effect. But let's take a look at Halation. I think that we want quite a bit of Halation in here, and you can see with it enabled, especially this part in the center is nicely glowing. But let's take a look at what is actually happening with the mask mode here. I think it's really useful to see this. So with this mask mode enabled, you see where that glow is happening exactly. And I love this no remjet setting. Remjet is like a backing that would actually block this effect. That's with the remjet, that's no remjet. I like the no remjet look. That, to me, makes it the biggest difference in making this look cinematic. And then a little bit of bloom is nice, a little diffusion here. Makes it look much less clinical. All right, so I'm really happy with this image, and I'm not going to mess with film damage, film breath, gate weave, overscan, but I do want just a little bit of vignette for a nice bit of moodiness there. So I love the way that looks. I'm done making my adjustments, but I do want to show you that you can actually control the global effect here with this output parameter. And this output parameter, it can range from 0 to 100. So you can really go with the heavy hand and do the full effect, or you can just find something, some kind of happy medium in between. And you might have noticed that there is a stopwatch feature that allows you to toggle an animation and keyframe your way through this. So I want to show you what that's like. So we're going to set this to 0 here, create a keyframe, and then we'll move it over to about there and turn that into 100. And then we'll just see this transform gradually applying our film emulation. And what I think is really cool is that you can add this sort of animation technique to really any of these parameters up here. Okay? And just so you can see a little faster transition. And I think that's pretty neat. So the one feature that I think is a game changer that really offers lasting value out of Dehancer is the LUT generator. So this LUT generator feature will really allow you to start building out your own custom LUT library with all these cinematic and film looks that you already know you like. And that means for your future projects, you can get this cinematic look that much faster. Okay, so that's Dehancer Pro. If you're looking for a powerful but easy way of getting that authentic film look in your footage, I think Dehancer is definitely worth checking out. There's a link to their website in the description, and if you use the code HD10, you'll get 10% off. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.